as an event, one of my big things, and I learned from Body Power, is that you can't stay still. Like you can't, you've got to evolve, and you remain a core focus of what you started and what it's about and the belief there. But if you don't evolve, you die.
With body power, like so many things that in hindsight just seem like such a no-brainer idea, right? Because there'd be no mass participation in fitness events for enthusiasts before body power. And it's just such, obviously, once you're up and running, you've got the success, it's such a huge show. It's like, well, of course, why didn't anyone else do that? Why didn't you do it sooner? Going
Yeah,
back to those very early days, Steve, were you convinced it was going to be a rip-roaring success? Or could you talk me through what it was like in those early days when you were mapping out what the journey was going to look like?
yeah. Well, I think firstly to that point, you never know. Like you've got intuition and you think things can work, but I guess going back to it, like a bit of a further backstory, like we'd always ran trade and consumer live events, so things like Fast and Furious car shows down at Brighton Racecourse, and big trade shows like the pharmacy, dentistry, veterinary shows. So we were in that sort of model of events. And then it was actually one of the guys, a guy called Matt Bevan, who he actually runs a gym down in Notting Hill now. But Matt worked within the business, and we were talking about the Mr. Olympia over in America or the Arnolds.
Mm.
Like essentially fitness, everyone in the office was into fitness, but there wasn't anything in the UK. There was small shows, there was very dedicated maybe bodybuilding events or things like that. Um, and at the time, the business was going through a sale, the trade business. The concept of body power was there. And I can remember really clearly that the CEO of the business buying us basically looked at it and said, we run trade events. This is consumer, so it doesn't fit into our portfolio, but also that market you're talking about. And essentially, we had narrowed it down to say we have to focus around either power sports or essentially, copy and paste from the Olympia to go bring American bodybuilders over. There was a big focus on everyone getting bigger at that time, but also the beauty was no one had actually seen these guys in person. So that was a bit of a USP. So we were saying, look, there's all this market, the sports nutrition market was in its really probably infinite stages. Um, and I haven't got the email, but I remember seeing it, and it was basically, I don't think we can invest in something where these people just use steroids, they do this, and this.
Right.
We don't think it will work. So you've got that from essentially an investor, experienced trade show organizer, to then going, well, actually, is there an opportunity here? Can we bring these people over? And you know, I still remember the room where we did like a lot of the planning and things like that, the team. So it was, you never knew it was going to be a rip-roaring success. But I think in hindsight now, and what I do a lot is look at the market positioning and say, what is there? What's the need, want, and can we fill that with something really good? Um, so yeah, hindsight's a great thing, isn't it?
I think that's the thing. 'Cause when you're looking at the other company coming in saying we don't really want to touch it, I mean, you could look at that one of two ways. Is it a risk if this experienced company doesn't want to do it? Or also, it's not really their beat, so we wouldn't expect them to understand. So I guess you could kind of look at it either positively or negatively from that feedback. But this is
Yeah.
also we forget this is a completely different time. There's social media's in its infancy. You don't have the influencer culture. It
I
was
think
complete.
Facebook was there. Well, I can't remember the dates, but yeah, 08, 09. I'm pretty certain it was only Facebook
Yeah.
that was the social that you could use. Like you say, it wasn't really a thing either.
No, and obviously the influence. It's hard to imagine now, given the influencer culture is such a huge part not only of our day-to-day existence in the health and fitness industry, but also in marketing and sales, all these other areas, which I hope we'll come to. But was there a moment when you thought this is going to be touch and go? Like I'm not sure we're going to make it in those early days, or was there always a bit of a head of steam that you felt if we can keep pushing, keep working hard, stick to our ethos, we're going to be okay?
Yeah, I think there the first year, without doubt, and I think it's for anyone that does live events or understands it, is especially when you've got the two sides, you've got the exhibitor base, so they're the paying clients that are they've got their space, they've got everything in there, and then you've got the consumer, the visitor. In a first year event, especially back in 08, 09, there wasn't a massive amount of like pre-sale and everything like that. We saw that we had a good amount.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking, like, I think the star name that we tried to get was Victor Martinez, um, one of the bodybuilders. And we're working with Dorian Yates, and sort of he came on to advise and help in that bodybuilding world. And the week before, Victor couldn't get his visa, and this happens so much in events. It's the whole swan with the legs going under and trying to remain calm on top. And we were like, what do we do? And I remember Dorian said to a couple of the guys, like Ollie and people, there's a guy called Kai Green, think he's going to be pretty big. We were like, okay, take his word for it. So going back specifically to that question of, definitely the first event of people turning up, the trepidation, the adrenaline, that's always massive because for me, one of the biggest things is I've spoken to these clients, said, we want you at our event. This is what we're doing. If you don't deliver that audience, you know what's coming. And they've invested a lot of time and money and a lot of new startup businesses at that time.
Mhm.
So yeah, from that point of view, the first year, but then I guess you see the queues and everything outside and you think, right, okay, we could be onto something. And then I guess a lot of events, we briefly talked earlier about, a rebook process and, if you get something good, people will sign up and come back. And there's always that thing of people standing off saying, we'll see how it goes. Let's see how it goes. If it goes well, we'll join in. And as per a lot of it, sort of year 2, 3, where we've got some good growth. I can still remember the numbers like really clearly of 8,216 people in the first year, up to 15,723. Those sort of things that stick in my mind. And I think we had one year we had a big jump. It might have been probably 2011, 2012. It sort of went from 30 to 50,000
Right.
because you got that sort of growth, the awareness, everything, the brands were involved, and we can talk about it more, but that sort of collaborative partnership of a brand being involved, as well as the organizer and everyone going in the same direction because they wanted it for, in many ways, own selfish means, but actually it was almost creating a new identity to the industry as well.
I certainly feel that my first exposure to the event, it felt very, very quickly like it was the central pillar of the UK fitness calendar, where not only brands in my former capacity as a magazine journalist, brands were talking about that was where they were going to focus their attention, new product launches, new athlete announcers. You had the consumers. People were doing 12 and 8 week programs to get pumped for body power. I mean, they
I
were.
yeah, it's still I sort of cringe to a point, and I'm like, it's mad that people were, and this is a sign of the times, wasn't it? That people were getting in shape, their best shape to aesthetically show off their training
Yeah.
and walking around with it. The amount of comments we said about people walking around with their tops off and things like that. But
That was the show
that was
initially.
the thing.
That
Yeah,
was certainly my first experience with the show. It was a lot of guys walking around with their tops off. But I guess, and I want to come to how the audience changed because I find that fascinating as well, having been there for so many years and seeing the attendees change in terms of demographics and ages as well. But coming back to that suddenly it became that central focus. Was that something that you were seeing from the consumers and the brands at the same time? Was your phone ringing off the hook with brands? I need a better spot. Was it that kind of just, it felt like a tidal wave of demand?
yeah. I remember at the time, like I say, after a few years in, when you built those sort of boring to many points, but you build those foundations, don't you, and establish something. But then you'd got exactly what you said there. There was, you know, bigger brand like USN at that point in time. I remember Aldi saying, I want that front space because when everyone walks in, they see we are the big player in the industry. And I get the big supermarkets, I get retailers, everyone. So people were, not fighting per se, but they wanted the best spots. So it's brilliant from that point of view. You've got a real ethos from the consumer that, the industry still isn't a huge industry. And back then, that gym market was probably smaller if we look at more of the independent gym market where, you could speak to, we had campaigns, people on the phone calling every gym, doing mailers, like the old school marketing. But that was the way that we'd worked. And, traditional marketing compared to now, it was a massive thing, but you could get the message out, and it definitely combined to create this almost ideal perfect storm of, you'd got the brands that wanted to be there to showcase what they were about, new brands, everything like that. And then you've got the consumer wanting to see the latest products. And we can talk like that consumer, what they want to get out of an event. At the time, I just remember the amount of samples from protein companies.
Yeah.
People used to go back and they'd empty their bag and be like, "Look what I've got! I've got yeah." They'd just be going around, and I've got videos of people at the front of the queue sprinting because they knew. I think it was bodybuilding.com at the time. They just gave a load, and the queue went round and round. And I look at it from one as an organizer, but also you're there going experience wise, and it's typically British, isn't it? They just want to queue up. Um, but that was very much people wanted the latest pre-workout, the latest protein, this, and this. And then yeah, as it evolved, you could really see it growing, and then we've got, I guess, a lot of it's nice looking back, a lot of the big success stories. I think Body Power had a big part to play in a
Sure.
launch pad, or it helped expose them to the market.
I think I'd love to come to that. And there's some specific examples I hope we can talk about because you had a sideline view of some of the biggest British success stories in the fitness and the wellness space. But coming back to that, that mentality of it would be guys with their tops off, filling carrier bags full of free supplements. That was kind of the initial days of my experience. But it felt like quite a sudden shift where the only women I would see in the early days would be the wives and girlfriends of the bodybuilders, right? Or the guys that wanted to be ripped. And there was that gradual kind of transition, I guess, towards more women being there in their own right, or older guys, or people that weren't into the aesthetics but were beginning to be interested in functional fitness or other forms of training. How aware were you of that change in consumer demand? Was that something you had to respond to, or do you feel that actually in hindsight you were leading that new demographic of people into the event?
Yeah, I think I always think of an event like Body Power or major industry events as that place in time where you visit and you see what's going on in the industry, and what are the latest trends and insights. And yeah, I think it started, our demographic was probably like 99-1, really, in reality, of male, female. And it stayed that way for a long time, but we got it, down to probably 70-30, that sort of level. But I think it went very much that male focused aesthetic and bodybuilding, and then you even had I remember, like, it probably when Instagram and Facebook was there, but you almost had like the bodybuilding crew going, we don't want those pretty boys that are just there with their six packs. And but then you had these communities forming, but off the back of that, you had a lot of females getting into the training sector. And yeah, I didn't think of it like this, but actually, like, it was the place that, like you said earlier, the place to meet.
Mhm.
And you've got these girls that were in really good shape or wanted to be. You've got these guys who are in the same place. And it was like a meeting pot, a melting pot of everyone in the industry. That, I think, we went through that aesthetics era, didn't we? And, the gym sharks of this world, and coming in with what they did definitely accentuated that. And then I think it got to probably, as an event, one of my big things, and I learned from Body Power, is that you can't stay still. Like, you can't, you've got to evolve, and you remain a core focus of what you started and what it's about and the belief there. But if you don't evolve, you die. And that was one of, in my hindsight again, I think that was one of Body Power's challenges and issues is it didn't move quickly enough. Maybe it moved like we could see, functional was coming in. We got far more into that, but then you got exhibitors or clients saying, "Well, we want to target bodybuilding still." But there was always a slight issue. But then there was some really forward-thinking brands, the Grenades of this world that go, "Well, actually, we're going into retail and we're more confectionery and wider market consumer." And that it comes back to, for me, one of the major things is having really good relationships and partnerships with the right people that you can then essentially create. I like to create my own network and almost like an advisory group
Um,
that I've got my own views and opinions, but I'll go to people I trust and respect and go, right, it's there, right. Can we bring features in that, yes, we've got, originally the bodybuilding, but can we bring in a more physique competition? Can we bring in more functional training gyms that allow, and it's after the event, if anything, that means people's experiences, oh, that was brilliant. I didn't realize it was this. They go back and word of mouth and they talk, and people that go, that was never for me, start attending. And it's that cycle of people, word of mouth, and it's until you attend something, you don't know what it is.
Is that one of the biggest issues when you are a trailblazer like Body Power was? Because there'd been no mass participation events for enthusiasts in the fitness industry in the UK before Body Power came along. You don't, if something's working, you don't need to fix it if it ain't broke, right? But you're juggling the needs of all these brands, some of which are going through the stratosphere because of the success of the show and the
Yeah.
platform given them. They want something. Maybe they want it to stay the same. Some want some big changes. The consumers want familiarity, but they want something new. How much internal friction is there within an organization where you've got maybe 11 and a half months until the next event and you want to make it better than ever, but you don't want to risk stuff? I mean, I'm trying to get in the mindset here of how you approach this as an individual and a team to deliver the best experience for the exhibitors and the attendees without ruffling any feathers internally.
Yeah, well, definitely. And I think within any team, I think having characters in there that, one of the things is, not having the yes men type mentality. And, for a few years, it was probably a bit like that. This is the way, and that's how it was. But actually, I guess there's a few nuances to it in the sense of, as an organizer, you've got that floor plan, you know what was on there. And from a commercial point of view, you want to rebook your clients, you want to get them back into almost the same spaces because, from a cash flow point of view, that's the next year.
Yeah.
You've then got saying, right, at this point in time, this is what's worked. So you almost have to create an identical floor plan, but then you've almost got the version 2 or version 3. And we used to get to version 10, 11s because companies would want to move, or like, can we go here? Can you move that? So there's always that. And then, like you say, over 6, 9, 12 months, things can pretty quickly change. So you're always looking at the space in the venue and saying, what could we do there? How could we do it? Is the front and center the best stand space for that company? Should we be putting a feature down there to draw an attendees down there? And when the show probably was around 20, I remember 2015, 2016, and it was ridiculously big. I think it was 5, 6 halls at the NEC. And it was busy. Every part of it was busy, but you were then juggling a different animal really of going, how do we get people all the way down there to service those clients rather than just these? When they've left, when they've come in, are they going to get back? So you always have to think of that flow of traffic, understanding some people are happy to be at the front and they get that first impact. And then when people come out, do you put entrances? And over the years, I guess it's not unusual. There's some pretty hefty discussions and, what should be going on. That happened hugely of, brands saying we want this, but actually it's your business as well. So I think what I've learned is you've got to have, almost like strongly disagree, or, if you've got a real strong opinion, it's not just an opinion. Like, go in with it and give reason to it. And that's what I think it was 2018, 2019. I was like, look, certain brands are moving way more functional. Look at what's happening in the gyms, the shift from loads of cardio apps everywhere to functional spaces. We've got, if we don't move and have that component to what body power is, we lose like the future. And there was then a big disagreement of, well, we need to be bodybuilding still because that's what we've been. And that's probably, like I said, some of my biggest lessons is you can have both, but you've got to realize bodybuilding maybe was as big as it was always, but the other components were just growing substantially. Um, and then you've got the element of, well, if we don't cover that, is someone going to come in with a new event and they take that market share? So yeah, there's always a lot of thought and discussion to what the event should be, how it's laid out, and yeah, the vibe, I guess.
Is that an inevitable part of the level of success you had? Because you're a victim of your own success, right? You've grown up on this fundamental foundation of bodybuilding, but all these other, fitness is bigger than it's ever been before. And I guess you either try and remain ultra focused and miss out on that new business, or you try and ride five horses at the same time. Do you feel that's just an inevitable part of the growth journey for a successful brand? Is you can't be everything to everyone?
Yeah, I agree to a point with that. I guess the world we're in now with very driven communities, I think you can still service and give value to a community. It's just sometimes I think what I've learned is what you hear on social media and the noise and the voices of a few people are sometimes louder than the actual reality. And we had that of, and I go back to it, the bodybuilding community saying, we don't want this, we don't want that. Well, there was still really good quality content or features for them to attend. But there was almost back at that time, I think there was more of a clash of communities. So the powerlifters wouldn't want to mix with the bodybuilders with the aesthetics. They all were like, this is us. Whereas nowadays, I feel there's a way greater acceptance and awareness of we're all in the same game. We're all in fitness, and you've got what you enjoy doing, but actually we're here. So yeah, I definitely agree. You can't be everything to every man, and I think I'm seeing it and hearing it from a lot of people in the industry that brands are actually going back a bit to what they know is their focus rather than trying to be absolutely everything. I think one of the biggest ones was, and we said it earlier, Grenade with Carb Killer or something like that, and they had got that initial product and they'd gone into retail and they'd gone quite wide in the sense of who their audience was. Suddenly every other brand's going, we'll just copy that, we need to do it. Whereas actually that didn't work for everyone. So I think as long as if you know what your brand and product is and you stick to that, you can always add and do partnerships or grow the audience. I think yeah, like I say, if you just stay still, you maybe it's a tough place to be. But then you create a legacy, don't you, of this is what we stand for. But yeah, there's the ability to implement new ideas or new concepts, or maybe it underpins from your values and what you stand for as a brand. If you can bring someone from a different sphere or a different world in, but they align with your values, then that's not a problem, and you can do a partnership or collaboration there.
One thing I felt you guys did really well in terms of evolving the event, and I think bringing disparate part of the fitness community together, was the education element that you introduced to the show, because then you had a central area where you could have people talking about optimal approaches for hypertrophy or strength or fat loss or functional training. It brought it all together. So from my point of view, that was something that was a real innovative addition to the event. What other things do you think you were absolutely spot on in terms of the evolution of the brand and the event? And what things do you think you got wrong?
I think from a good point of view, athletes played a massive role in it, and helped evolve because, like I say, having the Kai Greens, the Ronnies, all these guys, the Phil Heath, the Jay Cutlers in those initial years, And then you had like the Steve Cooks, the Ryan Terrys, those sorts, and then it moved further to bringing, different CrossFitters, for instance, over. I think we had like Jason Khalifa, and people like that. That to me is something that we got pretty good at. And, it wasn't just us bringing them, it was always working with a brand to say, right, who's who's come on board, who's got a great Instagram following that translates to attendees. So I think working on that side of things, the athletes was really good. I think the brands worked really well, again, of evolving the type of brands. So it went from just like random protein powders to actually products that, if I look at what an event should offer people, is one, an experience is brilliant and it's memorable, but two, they can come away from it, like you say, from an education point, having learned something, they've got some products that will benefit their training, or, nowadays, is it sleep, is it the recovery and wellness piece? So I think we did those elements well, and we utilized social media at that time really, really well. Think what didn't we do as well was, like, I guess it's a double edged, it's a bit hypocritical of saying we didn't keep track of the trends as much as we should have, to actually believe in what was happening. And like I said earlier, you listen to those few voices and you stay a bit static. But I think definitely the partnerships, the brands, the like they say, bringing new features in was definitely something we did well. And it's only when it probably got to a point where there was a bit of resistance to change and adapt that the brand actually started having a few issues.